Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin Pratap, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Easier Said Than Done podcast. And I'm very excited today to have Faris. Now, I know I haven't done an episode in a few weeks because I've been traveling, but while I was traveling, Faris and I have been, messaging quite a bit. And this guy travels and gets around way more than I thought a human being can or should. So I'm excited for you to meet him because he's quite an overachiever for somebody, who's just kind of been around in the industry for about less than 5 years, I think. Is that right, Faris?
Roundabout, yeah, I'm 25.
Yeah.
I don't want to admit it, but yeah, I'm 25, and my first dev job started like June 2020.
if I that's what I remember. If I was half of what you are, 25, I would have been something else altogether, man. That this is great. Thank you for joining the show. Why don't you introduce yourself, Faris, and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and the multifaceted personality that you are.
100%. I can keep it simple. I'm a staff software engineer at Smallpdf. If you can't guess by the name, it's a company that makes PDFs small, although I don't know anything about PDFs, which is the funny part because everyone likes to ask me and bring me weird PDF questions. I take care of payments, architecture, and monetization. So making money with PDFs, all those kind of financial systems. Then I am also the co-founder of Zurich.js, which is the JavaScript group in the Swiss-German region. And we're also doing Zurich.js Conf this year in September. And I'm also a DevRel by mistake. I travel the world. I have fun going to conferences and just yapping about resilience, performance, React, Next.js, monetization, and everything in between.
That's awesome. And for those who are listening, in case you think he's talking about just React.js and performance, no, he's actually talking about human performance too. This guy is very multifaceted. It's not just about code performance. He also talks a lot about human performance and resilience and not just about the code base, which is kind of important because it starts with the engineer, even in the era of AI. Now, he's very humbly said that, he's the founder and co-organizer of Zurich.js, but this is a pretty big conference. And if you guys are in Europe, you should absolutely go and check it out if you haven't already, and go look Faris up because he's like just about the most friendly person in the world. He's awesome. So, definitely look up Zurich.js, and I'll put some notes in the show note. Now, Faris, I know, I'm sure people have mispronounced your name. So let's talk about that. Tell me about some of the funny pronunciations of the name Faris.
I don't even think it's pronunciations. I think I've received more emails with my name ending in Z than I have in S. So I keep on, it's not even just the French pronunciation of Faris. And I also have the most interesting work journey where I live in Geneva, but I work in Zurich. So when I wake up, everyone speaks French. Then when I get to the office, everyone speaks German. So I can hear different pronunciations of my name as I commute to the office.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing about Switzerland is just how many languages exist in a very small region, like and even some dialects. So how many do you speak?
I speak French. I speak a little bit of German. I used to speak a lot more German because I was born in Zurich. But let's just say we have a lot of different ways to misunderstand each other.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, when I used to work at the UN a long time ago, and my friends, my Swiss German friends, and my German and my Austrian German friends, it was a lot of fun listening to them.
Oh yeah,
listening to the painter, tons of fun. Yeah, and names are funny things. Like I get all kinds of things with Zubin as well, right? Like I remember the funniest thing I ever got was actually from a colleague. For some reason, thought my name was Lubin Proton. And I'm like, how did you get from Zubin Pratap to Lubin Proton, which is a total porn star name anyway? Like, what is this? And they were so apologetic because I have a feeling they may have been using Siri or something to dictate something. And I think it came out as Lubin Proton.
Oh my God.
So it wasn't, and they didn't check it. Yeah, which is pretty funny. Anyway, man, look
up the sponsor or something after that.
Exactly. Funny stuff. Names are funny things, man. They're really funny, especially if you travel as much as you do. It's great to see how different people sort of experience your name or how you experience their name, and how just syllables are hard. Syllables are hard, and you think
definitely.
They're quite hard. All right, man. Let's dive into it. I really wanted to talk to you because I first heard you talk on Tejas's podcast, Contagious, and that's a great podcast as well for those of you who are looking to understand more about development careers and DevRel careers and what life as DevRel can be. Tejas's podcast also covers a lot of other broader life subjects, which I think is why I listen to it. It's a really valuable podcast. And that's where I first heard Faris, and he was very vulnerable, very raw, and also very personable, which is why I, pestered him to join this show as well. Now, Faris, why don't you I know you and I've talked about it a little bit. Why don't we start about, some of the things that worry you most about life and work and engineering and careers in the post AI world? This is something I know you've thought about a lot.
Yeah. This is something I was actually thinking a lot about this weekend, even though I was meant to, keep it a sacred weekend and not think about work. I didn't do any coding this weekend. I did not, which is like the first time in a long time. But even at work or for the longest time in engineering, you always think about, trade-offs that you have to make, right? Whenever you're building something, there's always a trade-off or a compromise you're making. Some of the trade-offs we most commonly make is, I don't have enough time to write unit tests for this, integration
Right.
tests, end-to-end tests. I don't have time to write the documentation. This will be a fast follow. Who loves saying fast follow, right? When you don't want to do something,
Exactly.
or we can't refactor this part of the code base. It's not going to be as extensible or modular or something else. So we're just going to do it later, and we're going to do a tech debt sprint, right? And funnily enough, like AI was meant to solve all of this for us, right? Give us more time to do the stuff
Right.
that we always had excuses for.
Right.
But now we just have the same excuses and are compressing the amount of stuff that we're shipping in a period of time. Instead of doing 20 tickets per week, maybe I'm doing 60 tickets per week.
Right.
And I'm leaving the same amount of debt in my
Right.
code base. In that same sense, maybe we were meant to use AI to delegate certain things, not delegate creativity or thought process, but delegate the kind of stuff we don't want to deal with, maybe administrative stuff, and give us more time for higher level thinking, more time to go on walks and see the sun, more time to just, live life in general. And we're doing less of that because we're so hooked on this dopamine train of
Yeah.
one more prompt.
This is
And I've
that
seen this in some, yeah.
LLM psychosis thing that you're referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And I've got this thing myself. Like I was going crazy with this idea this week, and cloud design has been amazing. And I've been prompting and prompting and prompting. All of a sudden, it's 1 a.m. I'm like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? This stuff is meant to give me more time to sleep, and I'm sleeping less than I ever had before.
100%. And it really gets in your mind because I've been working on a couple, that's the thing. Like a lot of people from Andre Karpati to, Gary Tan and others have talked about how they now gotten back to coding because they
Yep.
can via the agent. But it is incredibly involved because always feel that massive progress is within reach, just a few
Yep.
prompts away. And then you see how much progress you make. And it's really like, one of those slot machines where you
Yeah.
keep getting the hit, you keep getting the hit and you get the dopamine hit of rapid progress. And so you're like, okay, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, exactly as
Yeah.
you said. But this also at work, I think you referred to this as the industrialization of software engineering. It's producing huge quantities of output with not a commensurate or corresponding level of improvement in skill, knowledge, insight, or
Yep.
craftsmanship. Right? What do you think about that?
I think we're more often than not losing touch with the code that we ship. And that's a dangerous path to go
Very
down,
true.
because even though in the past you'd experienced this thing where like I'd look at a piece of code and like, who wrote that crap? Right. And then I'd see, the Git history and I was okay, it was me, right?
Yeah.
But you'd still have a relationship with that code. You would have the memory of going down a rabbit hole, the memory of searching through Stack Overflow. You would create your own mental model of how you went about
100%.
creating a solution, to the point where you're almost, as a trauma response to having found the solution to that, the next time you experienced or heard something relevant to that, you'd be like, I know, look this up, do this, do that. And that would have actually formed what today would be your prompt, right? But if you never go through that journey, what does your prompt look like today, right? And the more and more we lose touch, our prompts actually degrading is something that I'm curious about.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I kind of joined Devrel many years ago is because when I was teaching myself to code, I was in my late 30s and, starting out, and it was so hard because most documentation or, sort of quick starts and stuff can be written for people with a certain foundational level of knowledge already, and
Yeah,
it's implicit and understood. But if you're completely new to a topic, you have no idea what some of the words mean, even though they're English words.
yeah,
And so a lot of the learning actually comes from, like you said, the trial and error, the extraordinarily long and frustrating trial and error, stubbing your toe all over the place
yeah.
and building those mental models, because that's actually what's teaching you the entire decision tree, right? The final outcome is very sparse on actual information of how it got there because it's the final outcome. all the
Yep.
decisions that went into it are invisible. All the wrong choices that went into it are invisible, because you only get the end result. And it's those wrong choices that teach you a lot of the craft of engineering, of how to think about a problem, how to break a problem down. So, I think everything you're describing there it makes me sad a little bit, because I find myself falling to this as well, which is the temptation of speed is overriding my own judgment about my own learning, about what I need,
Yep.
and that discipline to just say I'm going to take the long road, even though it'll drop my velocity by, I don't know, 50%, whatever it is, but my learning will be so much more robust. But for folks like us who give talks and stuff like that, we kind of need to know what's going on. We can't just
Yeah.
let the clanker produce the output and demo the final result, because we'll get questions. And
Yes.
you'd hope a good engineering manager, reviewer of a PR would ask you questions too, but maybe not. These days, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people are shipping PRs that don't have a lot of review on them, or they have AI review on them. And so none of the humans actually seem to be, maybe may not be following what's going on in the code base. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah. I'm seeing that as well. And then just to touch about like talking about stuff on stage, that's such a responsibility to
It
be able
really
to
is.
talk about something on stage. And there are two things that I've seen. And it was very interesting that some of the people in the industry had put for me is that like when you're really early on talking at conferences, everyone's looking to prove why what you're saying is the wrong thing,
Oh,
that they
interesting.
know better than you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so you're like, you're fresh, you have no background. You're like, that person's wrong. No, this opinion's not right. And I'm going to go up afterwards and I'm going to challenge that. And some time eventually passes. And then you build so much credibility that what you say is taken as fact. That becomes even more dangerous because then nobody fact checks you.
Yeah.
Then one person, or you have 500 people in a room. Let's say even 10% of those, let's say 50 of them just go back and they do their own internal knowledge sharing on something that you talked about, took your slides, did not fact check a thing, and influence another subset of people. All of a sudden, one 30-minute talk has spread into, almost infecting 1,000 people with an
Right.
idea that may lead to building systems that weren't meant to, you know, do whatever you said they were going to
Yeah.
do, for example.
Bear that load 100%. So how do you, given the temptation of what AI can do now for coders, and since you describe yourself as an accidental DevRel, how do you decide how much time and effort to put into the preparation of something, given the opportunity cost of that time is all the other work stuff you could be getting done? Because it's like you said, the tickets haven't reduced in
Yeah.
number. How do you sort of make that trade-off? How do you reason about it in your head?
For preparing a conference talk,
Yeah, how much
specifically,
time
or
to allocate? Yeah, because you could do it the artisanal way, which is
yeah,
handcrafted, know everything that goes into it, or you could clank it and just demo the happy path, you know?
I handcraft it every single time. That's something that's almost a non-negotiable for me. I think when it comes to code demos, it's much easier to go down the route of prompting something together that resembles what you had built the slides for, handcrafted the slides for.
Right.
I've not done this as much as where it's been more useful in workshops where I mean, AI is really good at writing code comments, right? I don't need to step through the entire code and write to do comments. So I can just take a solution that I built and ask AI to just strip it down and replace it with comments.
Right.
This is not going to move away from my original intention, nor will it take away from my understanding of the code base. It's doing a very minimal effort that again would have been like an opportunity cost for me to do instead, right? And then you just review the final diff and so on and so forth. When it comes to preparing a talk, I tend to stray away from trendy talks. Maybe this is to my own detriment. Some conferences really like exclusive talks. They're like, oh, we want you to talk about the latest version of React 19 point this and whatever, and show us all these activity components and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can totally demo you how to use something in production before anybody's realistically used it in production
Yeah.
at scale somewhere. Which is interesting because when I was writing an article about it, like I at least researched that 60% of code bases were still on 6 versus 16 and 17,
Yeah.
which means that should I be talking to the 5% of people that are on the latest thing and looking to like, if your React app is so souped up and so fantastic that you're looking for that just additional gain that you're getting out of 19, then it's an interesting problem to have, sure.
Right.
So yeah, I spent a lot of time iterating. My best talk that I have today, which is Caching Payloads and Other Dark Arts, I think I presented almost 20 times. is the
Wow.
first talk I ever delivered in 2024 in February. The exact same core. And it's
Interesting.
been iterated. It went from, slide dev to Google Slides to keynote experiences to it went from being 20 slides to 128 slides to being presented in 15 minutes to 1 hour formats. There's so much you can do layering a singular talk over
Mm,
time and basing it on engineering fundamentals. Like I built this talk in a time where ChatGPT was just about becoming a thing. So we
yeah.
weren't really in this AI coding craze. And it's so interesting to see that same talk build on foundations that we're now losing a little bit.
And
And
when
so
you
I'm
say,
yeah.
sorry, Faris, just sorry to jump in there, but when you say this is like one of your best talks, why do you say that? What's so important to you? What dimensions do you consider to make this such a valuable talk?
Because the talk is no longer I speak about the topic, but it was no longer crafted by me. It was crafted by people around me.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so many iterations of that talk, so much input that, what about this? Oh, I have this question. What about that slide? It doesn't make sense. Oh no, use light mode, don't use dark mode, something like that. Oh, the diagrams are too big or too small. Oh, maybe you should switch this to using streaming instead, and we should move away from that. It's all being baked and iterated by what people ask for. And if you're not crafting a talk for the people and you're just doing it for yourself, what's the point of talking altogether?
Gotcha. So it's interesting. So it's almost like this talk has taken on its own life, become like a product, and you're
Yeah.
iterating on it based on feedback, right? So you're
Yeah.
constantly evolving and shaping the product. Interesting. Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's I think that's a kind of conference circuit that I've never had direct experience of, where you reuse a lot of the same talks, a lot of the sort of demos I've had to do in my career, been new product releases, and then
Yeah.
you sort of try to promote those. So that's actually a really valuable lesson for me to learn. Also, is to try and find those enduring sort of topics that matter, that can evolve over time rather than
Yeah.
just be tied to a product release, which makes a lot of sense. One of the things you also mentioned, in your context is, well, you do all these talks and you're an accidental DevRel, but I know you and I've talked about these days the level of this cultural. It's not just tech, but there's a cultural obsession with ambition, optimization, hustle culture
Yeah.
that sort of mix and blend into this environment, right? What are your views on that, especially in tech and stuff? And I've just come back from San Francisco, so I've got some interesting observations about that as well. But you know, yeah, what
Yeah,
are
when
your
I went to SF, I got a little bit of a taste. I think I was pitched 20 different times. I
right?
had to clarify I was not an investor of some sort.
Right.
Yeah, it's so easy to get wrapped up in hustle culture because all you experience is the outside persona that other people give off, right? And everyone else around you seems like they're hustling.
Mhm.
Everyone there, you could always find somebody that has more success than you, and you're always trying to draw yourself towards that success. What
Right.
you seldom see is all the longevity and all the consistency over years that has led up to that concentrated success. But all you view is the concentrated success,
Right.
and you're trying to leap towards that immediately.
Yeah. From day one
And
to day 100, right? Yep.
exactly, right? And that's all we see. And I fall into this all the time. Like when I first went to the conference circuit, I'm like, oh my God, everyone around me is successful. They don't need to use a CV anymore. They've got it figured out, and I'm lost and I'm an imposter here. And then I started hopping on calls with people, and people have their own health problems, and people have their own addiction problems, and people have their own AI psychosis,
Right.
and everyone's dealing with something. We've just become really good at putting on a mask. And that same mask then makes other people feel like they have to put on that mask. And so it is a conscious effort of a group and as a collective to create a vulnerable and psychologically safe space where we can all blend that hustle culture together in a way that we can also openly express ourselves, do it in a healthy manner.
Yeah. And it's so when you were in San Francisco, not just the pitches, which are like you completely relate to, but what was your interpretation, here in now in, April, May 2026, in the lead up to the, possibly some of the biggest IPOs in history? Like, what is your interpretation of the energy in the tech scene over there?
Seems like either everyone's either running away from something or running towards something, right? And I mean, I was at Stripe sessions, right? And so you're at the core of where people are trying to move the economy. right? Like
Yeah.
Stripe is everything about internet economy. Like on their website, they're like, how much of the world's GDP are that we process, right? And it's really cool. And so you can see that the amount of time that I heard AI agents, the amount of time I've even heard people trying to build something that don't even understand their own product, but they're so almost engorged by it. Like, it's almost like so wrapped up by this this story that we're building that the only way to do anything is to bake agents into it.
Right.
Now I think with the latest stuff, that the dynamic workflows that have been released along with Opus 4.8, everyone's like, if your product has workflows in the name, don't bother. Everyone's now going to be gunning towards removing workflows and going for something else, right? And
Yeah.
so it's all about also being an entrepreneur was making a bet and making a long-term bet. And if we're so wrapped up in hype, we keep changing our bets. And of course, there was a part of like, okay, product market fit, or what I really love is somebody once said, promise market fit, where, okay, you try something for 6 months and then it doesn't work out and you've got to pivot, but you had a bet that you stuck by for 6 months. We're
Right.
changing our bets so often, I think, that it's a hard time. I have a hard time buying into a lot of ideas.
Yeah. It's interesting. This thing about changing bets, because I met a bunch of old friends, people I've known for decades, and new friends at my new work at Cartesia and stuff like that. And I was just listening to all the different perspectives and worldviews, right? Because I come from a
Yeah,
different worldview. I'm a lot older than a lot of the folks, and I was there at a time before the internet was a big thing, and
yeah,
we've seen the internet sort of become this massive thing, and including the mobile web and all that. And it seems to me that there's the drive towards action, because action has become so cheap, right?
yeah,
Taking any, especially coding related action, has become so cheap that the need to think has dropped, in the sense that there was a time when you had to think, well, I have all these options in front of me, but the cost of pursuing each of these is pretty high. And
yeah,
so the trade offs are high. And so I need to be very intentional about what I decide to do next, because that means I can't do the other things. But now, when you can do all the other things in parallel, whether it's through, multi agent or swarm or whatever you want to call it, or,
yeah.
whichever tool you use, then you don't need to think so hard anymore about what's the right thing to do. And I worry that the downside of that is that we're just optimizing for speed without thinking about directional correctness anymore.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think would happen if we continue to do that? If, let's assume my thesis and that is broadly correct, what does that mean for developers in 5 years? What is it that we're doing, and how do we actually know we're doing a good job?
I think one thing that you alluded to very much is like a lot of things that we may have considered to be closer to one door options have now become two-door options, right? Or two-way door options. And so if you were to like pick a framework like Astro and you just went for it and built something with it, like, yeah, technically you could migrate to something else afterwards with a 1 year of effort. But now you can be like, hey, I can just prompt something to one shot it over to Tanstack start if I really need to. And so like we've all these options that we've created. And I think what we're losing is the beauty of the decision-making
Mhm.
process. I think we're making less ADRs. We're having less three amigos or like architectural decisions. It's so easy to make 10 decisions single day, whereas
Mhm.
those same 10 decisions would have been made within the span of a month, that we don't even bother with the process to record said decisions and hence never learn from the
Right.
losses that each decision made. I
Right.
think the weight of a decision has increased and decreased at the same time, because it's cheap to go one direction, undo, and go in another direction. But at the same time, your ability to make 10 really good decisions in a short period of time, because the time between decisions have been compressed, is ever
Mhm.
so more valuable than just making decisions for the sake of decisions. If
Totally.
you make 5 wrong ones just to switch back to 5 right ones, you've almost canceled the time out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I think. I think part of it
Yeah.
is also wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. And speaking of time, I think it's a lot of folks don't spend quite enough time, myself included, learning some of the things that we should, just
Yeah,
because, like we talked about earlier, the AI seems to help us leapfrog to the outcome without the actual
yeah,
trial and error and effort. So Would you describe yourself as a front-end engineer, Faris?
I think I lost that definition a long time ago.
Right.
I cannot. I've I've always said that I'm somebody with front-end expertise and full stack awareness.
Okay.
And I cannot be a database expert at the same time as being a GraphQL expert at the same time as being a React expert. It's not
Feasible.
possible without
Yeah.
some sacrifice. I've always lived by trying to be a T-shaped engineer as much as I could. But if you're a staff engineer at some point or a principal or whatever, you get to a certain level of seniority, even where you're tech lead, you have a responsibility no matter what end of the stack that you're on to,
Correct.
first of all, have an awareness and care for what correctness looks like on the other side of the stack. Like
Totally.
at my current day job, I help make a lot of decisions for the back end, but I'm not the one writing the Go code.
Sure.
I'm helping build the interface that I think will stand the test of time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then beyond that, you're also a product engineer at heart because you have to care what the end result is. You can
Okay.
build the most beautiful React component, but if it's not available and reliable, and you're not working with the DevOps team to make sure it reaches your users in every corner of the world, there's no point in building that component. You lose all pragmatism and all point of engineering. And
I
it was
agree.
really interesting. Like the video I was watching the other day is that, like, in larger organizations, we're so far from the end result that our
Mm.
performance is sometimes even just based on these OKRs that have nothing to do with what an end user is actually facing, right? And the
Right.
closer we can sit to, just like, forward deploy engineer state to the end user and what they're experiencing, allows us to develop this connection that creates this intuition we have for how we want to build for that user.
Yeah. No, I think that, and the reason I was asking that, Faris, is because I sort of wonder where all these distinctions were. 5 years ago, these were career paths, right? I used to
Yeah.
coach career changes to code quite a lot, and they were always like, should I be front end? Should I be back end? Should I be a full stack? And there was a time when that was an important decision to make.
Yeah.
What do you think now? What do you think in the next 5 years will be the important decision that people trying to enter the industry will be thinking about?
I think it's not too different than it was before. I think there's first of all a lot of change in hiring and perception. It's like a lot of companies are just like, hey, you don't really need to know. You don't need to know Java. If you know the front end, it's fine. You can prompt your way through figuring out how to write Python, Java, or whatever.
Mhm.
So that's it's not as big of a deal. We're putting less, weight on implementation details or even the language that we use, the way that we express something. In the same time, I've always thought there was a difference between a coder or programmer and an engineer,
Mhm.
right? Like, to open one file in one part of the code base at the front end and edit that and know how to string a bunch of syntax together to be able to make something that functions entirely different to being able to make a system work end to end. And your ability to make a system work end to end, your ability to communicate product requirements into engineering roadmap and vice versa, your ability to do stakeholder management, that has never changed. We've just moved where the bar is and how the role is composed to
Yeah.
be able to execute on that. So I think as long as you are somebody that can understand a product story and the engineering story behind it and how to tell that story to multiple people of technical ability or not, you're
Mhm.
going to be set well in the future. And I think more often than not now, we also have to tell the people interviewing us what our part of the job is and where we fit in. We rely so much on other people placing us within an engineering organization that we fail that we need to be somebody that figures out how we integrate into that.
Right.
And so I've also worked in organizations where I got a role that did not exist until I was interviewed because I helped shape the role in the interview
True.
process to then finally get it. We have to do more and more of that and to be able to tell our story of what we are and how we add value to something.
Yep. And I mean, everything that you're saying makes sense. It's definitely a very different way of thinking about jobs and careers for the younger folks out there who sort of entering the industry. Because I get a lot of these questions around, should I bother being an engineer? I get a lot of questions from existing, very experienced engineers, far more experienced than I am.
Yeah.
Be like, why did you leave the law and come to engineering? It's almost like I feel like I should leave the engineering, discipline and go to something else because I don't know
Yeah.
what the future is with AI. And I think that's true of every profession now, right? I mean, what we need to know to succeed in a given profession is probably going to change with AI, whether you're in, law, medicine, or engineering. I don't think it really matters. You still have to learn a completely different set of skills to,
Yeah.
in addition to the core skills, in order to use AI, because your tools have changed.
Yeah.
Your tools have changed. There was a time when farmers needed to know how to, ride a horse and mount a plow to an oxen, and now they need to know how to operate a giant piece of industrial farming machinery,
Yeah.
which is and don't need to worry about the oxen and the horse anymore. So that's kind of how these things are going to evolve. But a lot of people, I think, feel quite dismayed or overwhelmed, scared, etc. Right?
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of this change because you sort of built a career right in the midst of it. How do you stay positive and focused? Like, what's your mindset and beliefs around what success looks like to you?
I think all of this AI stuff, all this acceleration, all these tools, I think they create a bigger divide than previously. Whatever was mediocre will just end up being more mediocre. Whatever was great will continue to be great, because anyone that was an A player before knew how to think on their feet. They knew how to be agile, how to adapt, how to learn new
Right.
technologies. These are just a lot of new technologies to learn really fast. So maybe it's a new challenge for those A players, but it's harder to be mediocre. It's harder to get away with doing less, because now all of these things expose weak points or expose things that previously were easy to get under the radar, right? And so and I also see this a lot at conferences, or a lot when I interact with people. People are very lost, and I wish I was in the conferencing world pre-COVID, because I saw it was such an era of easy to get sponsorship. Some people told me that they would send one email to 15 sponsors and they'd get 10 coming back without even a go. Like, that's a world I don't live in, because I have 100 calls, and when somebody tells me yes, they'll sponsor, I have to double check the internet connection was working when they said yes. And that existed, right? There was so much of that abundance, and I wish I grew up in that. And the way I stay positive is because, you know, if you surround yourself with the right people, and that's been for any walk of life, that's been the right friend group, that's been the right colleagues, the right company, the right environment, the right stimulus, you've always been able to find people that lift you up. And
Mhm.
surrounding yourself, or being the person responsible for creating those environments, that's what we're trying to do at Zurich.js. We're trying to create an environment that lifts everyone up through positivity. You will evolve as a human being, as an engineer. You'll evolve culturally, you'll evolve psychologically, to be the kind of person that has grit and resistance to withstand all the battles that come ahead. And then you almost detach yourself from that process, right? I mean, I've compressed the amount of bad experiences I've had in such a short period of time that they no longer faze me. Like, I make mistakes. I've made mistakes on stage sometimes. I've made mistakes during panels. I've said the wrong thing plenty of times. And back in the day, it would embarrass the living hell out of me, and I would not sleep and not stop thinking about it for a week. Now, I do not even have the time to go through the embarrassment. I'm like, you know what? It's on to the next positivity, or attach myself to the next light.
Right.
And there's all of that opportunity around us. I think we just have to change the way we see finding those opportunities. And the light has a way of finding us.
Yeah, one of the things you said to me is that most of these opportunities that we end up getting kind of come from reputation. But the question I have on that is, and I don't disagree. I'm just for the benefit of people listening or watching, who could legitimately say, well, that's easy to say when you have a reputation, because you and I have whatever our runs on the board, our track record. But what happens to people who don't have a reputation, or who may have made a big mistake and lost their reputation? How did they rebuild their opportunities?
I think what we may have is public reputation, right? I think reputation exists in more spaces than just the known, or the social spaces, right? You also have reputation within a company, right? Somebody that always delivers, somebody that you can rely on, somebody like, I've been so held by the fact that, like, your ability to get promoted is based on your ability to get peace of mind. The more, and the biggest compliment a manager ever gave me is that, the biggest compliment I can give you is I don't think about you, because I have so many fires to deal with in a day. I don't think about you at all. And that's
Yeah.
a great thing. Before, that would offend me. I'm like, you're not tracking every positive PR that I'm shipping in here. And so it's peace of mind.
Yeah.
There are very few things you could do besides gross misconduct that are like irreversible reputation
Very true.
damage. And most things are human mistakes. And at the end of the day, I've changed. I messed up an indentation once in a YAML file early into Smallpdf, and I took down Japan and South Korea, for
Nice.
45 minutes, right? And maybe I was just doing so many tickets that I couldn't think of something. I couldn't think of the right indentation. I didn't lint. I didn't take the time to set up my local machine properly. Like the biggest CI errors I get today are prettier errors, right? Because
Yeah.
I just haven't bothered fixing my
Run.
local setup, and the CI. I probably cost a couple $100 in CI time just because of prettier, right? And
Yeah.
I'm at this level in my career, right? Why am I making silly mistakes like that? I think we need to find ourselves in environments that are forgiving of mistakes, understanding of our human sides, where we have bad days because we have maybe issues with our partners. Are having a sick day. We have to be able to make mistakes. The question I tend to ask most of the time when I have a new manager is, how much am I allowed to mess up before it's a problem, right?
Right.
And understanding this ground for mistake making that you have that allows you to understand, okay, how much can I innovate within the space, or how restricted am I to breathing? Right. And if you're in an environment where maybe you're working on a financial product and you cause downtime, and that's reputation damage, because like we can't hire somebody that caused this much downtime in our product, right?
Okay.
Sure, you're going to maybe not have the best reference checks for the next job, but you can always start afresh, right? I think if you carry the despair, or you carry the negativity from the reputational damage into your rebuild of your new reputation, that's going to be damaging the new reputation in and of itself. You have to be
Yeah.
able to reset. You have to be able to refresh your browser.
Now,
You have to
okay.
be able to say that it's a new day. I maybe have done wrong by somebody, but can I have an honest conversation with them and walk through the embarrassment and actually build this authentic connection with human beings around me that allow them to become allies that help lift me out of this hole that I've dug for myself?
Totally. And everything you talk about there is not specific to coding. It's actually a lifestyle, or a life skill,
Yeah.
right? It's the ability to say we're going to make mistakes. Some mistakes will be worse than others,
Yeah.
and sometimes you'll be in environments where the mistakes do have pretty serious consequences, and sometimes not. This could be in a coding world. This could be in our personal lives. This could be while operating a motorcycle. This could
Yeah.
be a bad night out and on town drinking too much. People are going to make mistakes, and I think everything you're talking about that, especially if it's a mistake that you end up having a conversation with your manager. I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't forgive a person who learns from their mistake. You know, like in the moment, you're
Yeah.
probably not going to. You may lose a job, you may not get the reputation back in the company, but nobody downstream really holds it against you too much if you've clearly learned from it and you have the
At
humility
least
to.
not long term. But when I've
Right.
experienced that somebody's unwilling to forgive you, it's probably because they're unwilling to forgive themselves.
Interesting. Okay, you're obviously thinking about something very specific. I'm almost tempted to dive into that, but may not be something we could talk about. So, yeah, okay, that's very deep. That's very deep. Because now I'm thinking all the listeners will be like, "Yeah, it's not my fault. It's not me. It's you."
It's always shared,
Yeah,
but there's always a human being on the other side of that story. Like
yeah,
I think so when I was doing my recent tour, I went to Warsaw and I went to Portugal. I went to Porto. I actually met my ex teams there, right? I used to manage teams in Warsaw and I used to manage teams in Porto. And I was like passing through and I had dinner with them and it was like, let's catch up. Almost all of them I used to manage, right?
right.
And so I was part of their performance reviews. Some of them I had actually laid off, unfortunately, because
Yeah,
of difficult times at the start that I worked at. And there is a human way to build a connection even after something that can be almost as embarrassing or as personal as a
totally. Yeah,
layoff, right?
totally,
And
totally.
so we were for the first time discovering who we are as human beings outside this work relationship that we had built, and understanding that, like, okay, why did those layoffs occur? Why did we experience that? Why was that the decision making? Why, like, and I was for the first time able to tell my personal side of the story, and they're like, oh wow, so there was a human on the other side that cared, even though I felt like I
I
was
was
having the
thinking,
worst day of my life,
yeah,
right? And I
yeah,
think we often don't, we put people in boxes that we
yeah.
shouldn't.
No, that's totally true. And I really wish more people pay attention to what you're saying there, first, because I think we lose sight of the fact that what helps anybody, whether it's a manager, an employee, a partner, a colleague, a friend, or pet owner, whatever it is remembering that there's a life form and an experience at the other end of this interaction.
Yeah,
And even if you're on the receiving end of bad news, like I've been laid off, I've also had to fire or pull the trigger on on people in the past. And if you're doing it conscientiously, it's not an easy decision.
yeah,
It's not as hard as receiving the news, but it's not an easy decision. And
yeah,
like you said, sometimes sharing that makes the invisible visible to the other person, and you can really, really connect human to human about this is a really shitty, messed up situation. Neither
yeah,
of us wanted the outcome. But when you step back and look at the scenario, the outcome is understandable, not pleasant, not okay, from an emotional point of view for
yeah,
everybody involved, but it is understandable. There was a logic, an internal logic to it that, in the context of a business or in the context of
yeah,
a company or in the context of a startup made sense. And, unfortunately, there were outcomes for everybody. And I think not enough of that gets told. I think everybody tends to avoid those difficult conversations about, and I'm glad that you sort of took the time to go and meet with these folks in your team, because I think that will be an enduring relationship, for
yeah,
decades. Yeah, it also builds trust, and they know that you're thinking about. And that's what most people want, man. Like most people just want to know that you recognize their experience,
yeah,
even if you couldn't change the outcome. That you recognize that they had an experience that was not great or was great or whatever it was. They just
yeah,
want to be acknowledged in that. Man, that, like I said, I promised at the start of the show that you're one of those guys who's extraordinarily deep. And there we went into a very deep conversation about that had nothing to do with code and more about, especially in the age of AI, something that's very important is to keep that human connection up, and that the human angle must always be front and center, no matter what we're delegating off to the AI and no matter what we're doing with our work flows. We need to remember that there are human beings that, on all sides of these relationships,
yeah.
and the outcomes. So thank you so much for that. One last question for you. Something you said again that I totally agree with, but I want more people to hear about is you did say identity drives behavior, right?
Yeah.
Very true. I know Tony Robbins and a bunch of other people say that as well. Like who you think you are, or who you decide to be, or who you believe yourself to be, sort of ends up choosing a lot of your actions. How did you come to this conclusion?
I think a lot of things are choices, right? We could either be subject to the emotions or whatever state we're feeling in a particular day, or we can choose to be something else. Like just because I'm going out and I'm speaking on a stage or I'm on a podcast or I'm doing anything in life doesn't mean I'm having a good day or bad day, even though I'm going in, I'm screaming positivity the entire time, right?
Right.
I choose to be positive. I choose to be somebody that lifts other people up. I choose to be better every single day. I choose to not let other things affect me. And so I before I understood my own identity, and I'm still figuring out my own identity, you latch on to other people's identities or pieces of other people's identities. There are people that I used to look up to and still look up to, and that evolves over time. And I'm like, I really like this part of your identity and personality. I'm gonna inherit that for the day. I'm gonna test this out. I'm gonna take this piece. I'm gonna take that. I'm like, oh, I don't like this, or I'm not feeling this. Oh, this feels natural. And slowly, almost like iterate, beta test yourself and figure
Yes.
out when you're going to release it out into the world. And then every day you're making a choice to stand by that. Like I've had so many experiences where, like, even at my own meetup on a subject that I'm considered to be an expert on in financial technology, I've had somebody point at me and say that you're wrong, but it's okay. I understand why you can be mistaken. Whereas I'm totally fine being wrong. I'm the most happy person in the world to be the dumbest person in the room. But there's certain things at some point you've had enough experience where like, I kind of know what I'm talking about here.
Right.
Like that's the moment where you're like, who am I and who am I choosing to be when I respond to that?
Right.
And I choose to be understanding. I choose to be accepting. I choose to create a space where that person can grow rather than being that my identity being that I'm right.
Right. It's so true about, especially about, people, and it's a human nature thing where going back to what you said earlier is, when you're giving a talk, or when, in a conference circle, a lot of people want to challenge,
Yeah.
and they want to sort of assert their point of view, because our need to be right is more important than our need to be factual or correct,
Yeah.
and that it's sort of a slight semantic difference, but it's important. And the identity thing, everything you said there was so wise. And having done the career change thing myself, I can share that it was a huge struggle, because a lot of the time over the years, your identity becomes defined by the things you've done in the past,
Yeah.
right? So it's a reflection of your past. And over time, it kind of gets calcified. Often a lot of it is derived by what you've done for work. So for me, for a
Yeah.
long time, it was, I'm a lawyer. And it's very hard to remember that the identity you've acquired by over time is not actually locked in stone. You can,
Yeah.
to your point, you can choose every minute of every day. You can
Yeah.
choose to take on a different identity, and there is a long period of discomfort when you're in transition. From one identity to the other, whether from fit to whether from unfit to fit, whether from addict to non-addict. Like, I've spoken to all sorts of people. There's a very long period of uncertainty and discomfort, but it's always the choice until one day it's the default, you know.
Yeah.
One day it's the default. And so I really hope people tune into what you're saying there, because it's really, really important for all the folks out there who are struggling with their sense of place in their world, their displacement professionally, what AI means to them, what their career means to them, especially for the young folks coming out of college there. There's a lot of confusion, because they feel their identity was kind of defined 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But in many senses, you get to choose whoever you want to be next. And it's not going to come. It's not going to come to you on a platter. There's a lot of work that has to be done, but no one's there's that door that is, or that prison you think you're in, has no lock, has no key.
Yeah.
You can just open that door anytime you want to walk out. It's just going to take some effort.
Yeah. I mean,
Would you agree with
at the
that?
end of the day, I completely agree. At the end of the day, your success really is dependent on how comfortable you are being uncomfortable.
Right.
And when you're uncomfortable, that's the time to get excited, because you're like, what am I going to do with this feeling? Am I going to avoid it, or am I going to embrace it and do something with it? And that's the
Right.
challenge, that the more we face, the more we're able to lift ourselves out of that feeling and go face the next discomfort.
Yeah.
Not run towards comfort, but go face the next one, right?
It's
And it
true.
almost becomes a love for the journey of seeking discomfort, and then realizing when you're up high in the clouds, the comfortability that you built for yourself through that. And I think that's a
Right.
beautiful story we can all tell for ourselves eventually.
Well, I really wish I get to that point where you clearly are, where you look forward to the discomfort. I do not. I kick and scream and grumble on the inside. I mean, I do it. I go walk towards it, because I do take it as a sign of where my growth lies. Like, everything I want
Yeah.
is on the other side of my comfort zone. But I don't look forward to it. I have to get
I
it's like
think
yeah.
I'm a little different. I have no choice, because for the last decade, I've lived most of my life uncomfortably. And that was not by my choice. That was
Right.
by the choice of health conditions, chronic health conditions. And there are days where I've had 3 hours of sleep and been deathly sick the day before. Like, this happened at JS Day Bologna, actually. I was like deathly sick the night before, fever. My co-founder Bogdan was like, there with me, and he was like, "Are you okay, man?" And I'm just like, "It's our Tuesday," you know. And I mean, it's not a regular Tuesday, right? But I went out and I delivered my talk and everything, rebooked my flight. I went that afternoon, right? And I actually wouldn't have done that if Nadia and Bogdan hadn't pushed me to do that. So I sometimes don't realize what my weak points are. And he said the scariest thing that he had witnessed is that nobody would have been able to tell what condition I was in the night before, right?
Yeah, wow.
And and so while it's not something I live with most days, there are a lot of times where I'm subject to the uncertainty of my own health condition. And I know many people have uncertainty with life in general. At the end of the day, like, I've been subject to a lot of discomfort as a result of my health condition. I have a lot of back issues. I'm somebody that needs a lot of sleep. I'm always sleeping at like before midnight. After midnight, I'm absolutely broken. I am not somebody that drinks. So like, there's so much I have to do to live with that discomfort, that there's no choice but to want to live a beautiful life. You have to see the positivity in most things. And to see that within yourself is to then also then see that eventually in other people.
Yeah, and you said this for those who haven't who want to know more about how Faris thinks about this. Go and check out the Contagious podcast with Tejas as well, because you talk about it there as well. I didn't want to sort of
Yeah.
dig too much into it because it's been covered there. And but for those of you wondering how the heck Faris goes around thinking like this, listen to that podcast as well. It'll explain how he sort of formed this point of view. But the important thing for everyone to take away is that these are all choices. These don't come naturally. These don't people aren't just born with these things. Maybe some people are. I haven't met too many who are born with it beyond a certain basic amount, but then after that they have to really whittle it down. So
Yeah.
I know Faris has to go and do a stand up, and has to go and sort his team out and work with his team. But thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really enjoyed that conversation, and more importantly, I enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more, because I know you and I've been texting a bit. So thank you so much for your time. I really
This has
appreciate
been
it.
incredible. Thank you so much. And you're an absolutely wonderful and such a well-spoken podcast host. Like I've loved every minute of it. I wish
That's
we
so
had
kind of you.
longer. A
Yeah,
second episode is due at some point.
almost certainly is, my friend. Almost certainly is. To be honest, I didn't do very much. You're just an interesting person with deep thoughts and things. That makes it so much easier. I just had to riff off you. So really the truth of it. So, thank you for that, man.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You
Thank you
too
for
have a
everything, man.
great day.
Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.